Good morning, all you brave, warm souls. And welcome. I want to, oh, now you can hear me. Okay, good morning, all you brave, warm souls. And welcome, and did you see the folks out front today? Those are ham radio enthusiasts, amateur radio, particularly the East Bay Amateur Radio Club, who is now meeting here in person, and they were doing an emergency drill today, and actually the antenna they had up in the front of the building could reach a repeater all the way out in Napa from here. Our location is grand, and as we continue conversations, we might put something up on the roof and be able to reach even further. Really cool stuff. So welcome to EBARC as well. Every little thing that breaks your heart is welcome here. We'll make a space for it, give it its due time and praise for the wanting it represents, the longing for something more, some healing hope that remains not yet here. We promise no magic. Sorry, we don't. We promise no magic, no making it all better, but offer only this place of trust, this human community that remembers, though imperfectly, that sings and prays, though sometimes awkwardly. This gathering that loves, though not yet enough. We're still practicing, after all. Still learning, still in need of help and partners, still becoming able to receive all this beauty and all these gifts that we each bring when we come here. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning, everyone, to this last Sunday of January. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. Our slides are a little bit loose today because we had a technical problem. So just bear with them. They'll be loose, we'll be loose. I'm Karen Elliott. I'm your worship associate for today. This is a welcoming congregation, and we are always working on how to better welcome and care for each other. If this is your first time here, we are truly glad that you've come. Whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we begin, we want to acknowledge that this church occupies the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, land in Huichin. We understand that we continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of this land. We acknowledge and embrace our responsibility to take restorative action. We affirm that this is deeply felt, and we commit our congregation to be in right relationship with Indigenous communities, aligning in solidarity, supporting Indigenous projects, and caring properly for the land. Let us kindle our chalice flame today with these words: with faith to face our challenges, with love that casts out fear, with hope to trust tomorrow, we accept this day as the gift it is, a reason for rejoicing. We also pause to remind ourselves of some of the foundations of resilience. With Reverend Michelle, we light a candle of courage, a candle of acts of service, a candle of fellowship, and a candle of hope. These 4 bright candles represent foundations of resilience. May we cultivate them in ourselves and in one another. And now, please rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening song, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." You've already had practice. It's number 16 in the gray hymnal, and the words are on our screen. Thank you.
Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight, when true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
Please remain standing if you can, and join me in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
And please remain standing. The next song is going to have a part for you. So the section leaders were just fantastic. They're all here. They're going to sing the phrase at the beginning, little section, and that'll be your turn. So you'll see the words up on the screen. You come in the second time through. Then there's a second portion. They'll sing it. You come in on the second time and then sing right to the end. Or you can sit down and just listen as you prefer. Or you can sit down and sing, whatever you want to do. Thank you.
One word for happiness. Cheng Kung was head of a large household. In his compound lived his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, plus assorted aunts, uncles, and cousins. This family lived together without quarreling or unpleasantness of any sort. Everyone got along perfectly. Even the dogs in Cheng Kung's compound did not fight. Everyone was content and happy all the time. People talked about this amazing household. Even the emperor heard of Cheng Kung's happy home. He decided to visit this renowned family. The emperor was curious. What could be the secret of such happiness? Cheng Kung welcomed the emperor into his home. The emperor saw that everyone truly seemed mild and happy here. Cheng Kung, how can all of these people live together in such happiness? What is your secret? He wondered. He asked him. Cheng Kung did not respond. He simply took out his brush and began to write. Over and over, word after word, he filled a sheet of paper. Just one word appeared there. It was written over and over and over 100 times. The one word was kindness. I see, said the emperor. And taking the brush, the emperor also wrote kindness. He wrote a proclamation expressing his joy at finding a household such as that of Cheng Kung. Cheng Kung was told to paste this proclamation on his gate so that everyone could see the emperor's words. Kindness. From that time on, Cheng Kung's fame grew. People began to stop by to ask for his picture to paste in their own homes. They wanted peace and happiness in their homes, just as he had created in his. To this day, Cheng Kung's picture hangs in many Chinese kitchens. He is known as the kitchen god, and he reminds everyone of the secret to happiness. Just one word. Kindness. I have a question. Raise your hand if you think that it's easy to be kind all the time. I am amazed that someone raised their hand. I am so happy that you are in the world, and I can say it is hard work. Am I kind all the time? Nope. Do I try? Absolutely. And I have some homework. So kids, over there on the carpet or in the pews, I have some homework for you. Your homework is to remind your grown-ups when they forget. And grown-ups, I have a challenge for you. Your challenge is to listen.
We're going to sing the children to their classes with a song you've sung twice before now. 'Tis a gift. Here we go.
Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. its way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice lights our day. Oh, world, I dream where black and white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth, and everyone is free. Of such I dream, 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 where wretchedness will hang its head, and joy like a pearl that tends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream, of such I dream. Of such I dream. I dream of.
Thank you, Megan, Marcel, Rod, Paul, and Brian. You have truly lifted our spirits. That was gorgeous. So before we move into our meditation, I'd like to invite us into our time of grounding and centering. As I invite you to, well, first close your eyes if you wish. Take some deep breaths, holding them in and then releasing them, letting the love move in to you, sit with you, and out so it moves through you, infusing you. As we do this, imagine a circle around yourself, holding you in its kindness, its happiness, its love, and its light. See this circle drawn around you. See it glowing, see it healing you, filling you, holding you. And now draw it a little wider. Draw it wider to include a few people who are sitting around you where you are. See that circle touching them. See your circle touching them with light, with kindness, with happiness. And now I invite you to draw it a little wider than that, surrounding the people in the room where you are, or if you are at home, surrounding the homes around you, or the apartments, or the other dwelling places around you. Holding all those, whether you know them or not, whether they are on 2 legs, or 1 leg, or 4 legs, or no legs, or wheels, or whatever they are on. Holding all beings in that circle, in light, in kindness, and happiness. Now I invite you to draw that circle wider still. See it growing from there, growing and encompassing the community where you are, the city. See it growing wider and wider still, filling it with both the people, with the other animals and other beings, with the earth, with the trees, the mountains, filling it as you grow your circle wider still. See your circle holding all of these in light, holding them in kindness, holding them in compassion. Hold this circle in your mind during our time of silence. You hardly knew how hungry you were to be gathered in, to receive the welcome that invited you to enter entirely. Nothing of you found foreign or strange, nothing of your life that you were asked to leave behind or to carry in silence or in shame. Tentative steps became settling in, leaning into the blessing that enfolded you, taking your place in the circle that stunned you with its unimagined grace. You began to breathe again, to move without fear, to speak with abandon the words you carried in your bones that echoed throughout your being. You learned to sing. But the deal with this blessing is that it will not leave you alone, will not let you linger in safety, in stasis. The time will come when this blessing will ask you to leave, not because it is tired of you, but because it desires for you to become the sanctuary that you found, to speak your word in the world, to tell what you have heard with your own ears, seen with your own eyes, known in your heart, that you are beloved, precious child of God, beautiful to behold, and you are welcome, more than welcome, here. Amen. Please remain seated for our meditative song, How Could Anyone? The words will be on screen.
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful?
This reading is adapted from a longer essay called Love Without Conditions by Lauren Hulse. 2 years ago, one morning in the middle of winter, I realized the danger of my situation. I was in a tenuous relationship. I had moved to the other side of the country to be with him, in a place where I had no family, no friends, no acquaintances, nothing. We lived in a refurbished boxcar-turned cabin, an hour's drive into the country up a winding dirt road, where we had no phone line, no internet, and only one neighbor within walking distance. Amazingly, this had all been tolerable when it was only just me, but on that morning, I was looking at a positive pregnancy test, and everything changed. My mom and I had started going to Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church after she and my dad divorced when I was 6, and we attended off and on throughout my childhood. The congregation supported me in so many ways. When in elementary school, I was so ostracized by my peers that I chose not to speak, my religious education teacher welcomed me and made sure I got to build a diorama, even though we hadn't attended in weeks. And there was a place for me as an awkward and socially inept middle school student on a secondhand sofa in the youth room at church. That was the first community I found that offered love without conditions, the first place where my voice was valued. I met David, not his real name, right before I graduated from university, and within weeks he was living with me. Over the course of a few months, my primary relationships all started to fail, and my other housemates moved out. Then David abruptly announced that he was moving back to Boise and needed me to go with him. I lived in Boise with him for several months, but I made no social contacts except for shallow acquaintances with the people who worked at the restaurant where David had gotten a job making pizza. We went a few times to a United Church of Christ church, but even there I couldn't connect. To David, attending the Unitarian Universalist church was out of the question. Eventually, desperate, I decided I was going, alone or not. Just pulling into the parking lot, I felt a wave of peace and safety wash over me. Two things I had forgotten how to feel. These are my people, I thought. Even though I hadn't met them yet, I knew they were part of my extended Unitarian Universalist family, and that I would be welcomed and accepted there no matter what. That single Sunday that I visited, I met a couple, Dan and Aria, who gave me their card. "If you ever need anything," they said. It wasn't a big deal to them. Offering to be there for a person new to town was just what you do. But for me, it changed everything. Now I had friends. A few weeks later, my car broke down, and the shop announced that it couldn't be fixed. I paced the icy sidewalk, trying to figure out how I was going to get back to the boxcar that night, much less back and forth to work. David was nowhere to be found. We had had a fight days before, and he had left. In that moment, something broke up inside me. There was no one to call and nowhere to go. Then I remembered Dan and Aria. And I remembered I wasn't alone. I called them, and they said, "We can come get you, of course." They picked me up in their big burgundy Ford Bronco, and we drove all the way out to the boxcar. All those miles up into the hills, talking the whole way. As we drove, Aria asked me questions about my faith, my philosophy, my vision and wisdom, and she listened to what I had to say. In the months I had been with David, I had forgotten what it felt like to be listened to have my ideas respected, and to be treated with care. Having my inherent worth recognized and honored by Dan and Aria that day planted the seed that cracked open the morning that I found myself staring at a positive pregnancy test, full of joy and sacredness and fear. I knew I had to leave David to protect this new life that I was carrying and my own. If I hadn't known that I have a faith community where I can belong, no matter where I am or how messy or desperate my life may be, I might not have met Dan and Aria that day and been reminded that I am inherently worthy of safety and happiness. But as a Unitarian Universalist, you can show up messy and hungry and lost and afraid. You can show up with nothing to offer, having made every mistake there is to make, and still be met with forgiveness and acceptance and love without conditions.
By the way, I know we have some Dan and Arias here under this roof, too. There's a gem of a poem, heartbreaking too, written anonymously by a high school student. My father asked if I am gay. I asked, "Does it matter?" He said, "No, not really." I said, "Yes." He said, "Get out of my life." I guess it mattered. My friend asked why I talk about race so much. I asked, "Does it matter?" He said, "No, not really." I told him, "Yes." He said, "You need to get that chip off your shoulder." I guess it mattered. My neighbor asked why I put that ramp up to my front door. I said, "Does it matter?" He said, "No, not really." I told him because it made my life easier. He said, "Is there a way to make it less obvious?" I guess it mattered. A member of my church asked why I like gospel music. I asked, "Does it matter?" She said, "No, not really." I told her it connects me to my Southern Christian childhood. She said, I think you're in denial about your oppression." I guess it mattered. My God asked me, "Do you love yourself?" I said, "Does it matter?" She said, "Yes." I said, "How can I love myself? I am gay, Latino, disabled, and Christian in a hostile climate." She said, "That is the way I made you. Nothing will ever matter again." Isn't that poem gorgeous? A high school student wrote that. A while back, I talked about a big red yes that is on the walls of the Faithful Fools Street Ministry in San Francisco, or at least it was while I was there. This "does it matter" in the poem is the type of yes I'm referring to. The yes that each of us is beautiful and worthy, and each of us matters. And the yes that we are all worthy of being accepted. But let's take the word accepted, and I'm going to seriously mess with it today. Y'all ready for it? Y'all ready for it? Okay, better. As Universalists, that side of our faith tradition, we talk about universal love and may quite easily extend that idea to the idea of universal acceptance. But let's stop and talk about what that might mean. I've seen the exact phrase universal acceptance in more than one UU community's mission statement as well. So some folks hold it up quite high. The idea, or ideal, if you want to put it that way, the idea of universal acceptance raises a lot of really good questions. What does universal mean? What does acceptance mean? Does universal mean everyone? What about folks we may disagree with? Disagree about what? Or who might be disagreeable? Mass murderers? What might unacceptable opinions be? What about unacceptable behavior? Or unacceptable identities, even? Does it mean accepting them or welcoming everyone, or just tolerating them? Or accepting them into what? Our congregation, our community, our nation? Or just acknowledging there being humans also on the planet with us, whether we're willing to share airspace with them or not? See, I told you it was messy. The idea of universal acceptance is certainly a complex one with many possible interpretations and possible meanings and implications for us. So let's step back and talk about tolerance for a second. There is a deep history of tolerance and acceptance in Unitarianism and Universalism. So one of the things we can look back to, may often do when we get into our UU history, and I know we got at least a couple UU history geeks here in the room, is the Edict of Torda. Who's heard of that? Okay, we got a few. After today, you can all say you've heard of it. The Edict of Torda, it came from a time when Europe was a hotbed for religious questions and debate. And before I talk about King John Sigismund or Francis David, who you may have heard about in relation to the Edict of Torda, I'm going to talk about Giorgio Biandrata. Who's heard of him? Oh, a few, yay. And of course, Jay, I know you would raise your hand there. Now, Biandrata was a troublemaker of a massive sort. He traveled from town to town to town in Europe and talked with folks about his anti-Trinitarian views to get discussion going. And then after he got that discussion going, he'd move on to the next town and do it again. Eventually, he made his way to Transylvania, where he influenced the court minister to the young King John Sigismund. And Biandrata, I didn't just say doctor for nothing, he was a medical doctor. So he was going from town to town, practicing his medicine and getting discussion going, because he was, a trustworthy sort, right? Now, shortly before all this happened, another part of Unitarian history was going on. The notorious, and I mean notorious in a good way, anti-Trinitarian Miguel Servetus, had been burned at the stake, surrounded by his books and refusing to recant his beliefs. This is all thanks to John Calvin. As a result of his rather horrific death, many began to call that punishment into question and raise calls for a greater degree of tolerance and respect. So there's where kind of the political situation was. So let's go back to Transylvania. Court Minister Francis David, influenced by the aforementioned court physician Giorgio Biandrata, preached these views of tolerance and Unitarianism to the young king, who ultimately signed the first official statement of tolerance in Europe, possibly anywhere, the Edict of Torda. The Edict of Torda prohibited the persecution of individuals on religious grounds and sanctioned the existence of 4 received denominations: the Catholics, Lutherans, Calvinists, and Unitarian churches. While Sigismund's successor prohibited religious innovations, yes, it was actually a technical and legal term, religious innovations. I kind of want them to prohibit that here. That would be fun to work against. Anyways, religious tolerance became a hallmark of the region. Tolerance remained a hallmark of Unitarian thought, and even today forms a foundation for our congregations. The fact that we affirm and support each individual's own search for truth and meaning is something that brings many to Unitarian Universalism. How many of you came and found that tolerance something that you loved here? Yeah, me too. 2 hands for me. Absolutely. So there's a theological grounding for talking about universal acceptance in our Universalist heritage too. So all that with the Edict of Torah, that was the Unitarian part of our history. So we've got the Universalist part of our history too. Traditionally, Universalist theology stood in direct opposition to Calvinist theology, where Calvinism preached a hearty plate of hell and damnation. Universalism preached the opposite of that. They preached about God's love that was universal, and thus so was salvation. The idea of universal salvation became the hallmark of early Universalism in this country and many places. So many of these thoughts have either continued today in some form or another. The tolerance of many beliefs and what each individual finds for themselves. The universality of love and salvation for all. These sound familiar, right? So it's just another step to talk about universal acceptance, right? Okay, got those brains going. Excellent. So let's take another step back and consider one of our UU principles, the first of those, in fact. And if you want a review of the principles, I don't know if it's the first 6 or the first 7. I can't remember if the printing of our gray hymnal was before the 7th one came into existence, but they're in the first few pages there. So if you want to take a look at those principles, it's right there in front of you. The first principle calls for the affirmation of the worth and dignity of every person. Now that's complicated all by itself, and many UUs and even some UU congregations have struggled with whether to accept this particular principle. Affirmation of the worth and dignity of every person. So back when I was a hospital chaplain, I would often get asked the question, what religion are you? Because as chaplains, we were interfaith chaplains. I usually got off easy because I'd say our full name. I'm a Unitarian Universalist. And since largely they had never heard of us before, they'd try to repeat it, but say only universal. Okay, so that's everybody, right? And I'd not answer, and then they would forget about even asking the question because it didn't really make a difference to them, and just get on to talking about what we needed to talk about for my chaplain visit. But sometimes just answering Unitarian Universalist would open up a whole other conversation. I remember one in particular that left me thinking for a long time, and thinking about it still. This particular person said, after I said Universalist, he said, okay, tell me something you believe in. Okay, that's not the normal elevator speech, so I stumbled for a moment, and my brain grabbed the first thing I could think of, the first principle. We believe in the worth and dignity of all people. Well, I don't, he says, and I wonder if you really do too. Now, what ensued was a really fascinating conversation. He went on to tell me a little bit about his own personal background, which related to why he didn't believe it. He worked for folks who were in charge of large-scale drug operations, and he was one of their enforcers. I didn't ask for more details because, number one, I didn't want to know, and number two, my imagination was already making up plenty of them. He told me he had seen plenty of deplorable individuals who he didn't believe were worth anything, and so there wasn't a way he could affirm this particular belief. I wondered to myself if he may have also questioned his own worth and dignity, and that might be where it was really coming from. In a hospital setting, in general, and frankly, in many forms of medical care, it can be hard to find one's own worth and certainly to find one's own dignity. Many situations where we are just our souls and selves laid bare, sometimes literally, making it difficult to find. But it's also that our principles and really our values are actually aspirational rather than definitional. Although you could say they are definitional through their aspirations, but now we're just twisting our minds into knots. But by this, I mean saying we have a principle doesn't mean it's true for each and every one of us all the time. It means it's something we're working towards, perhaps a guiding principle. Our first principle doesn't say, look, everything has worth whether you think it does or not, so just get over it, and that's just the way it is. It says we affirm and promote the idea of inherent worth and dignity. We take it as a statement from outside ourselves and then see how that guides us and our ethics in the world. So getting back to our main idea for the day, there's a difference between acknowledging the inherent worth and dignity of all people and the idea of universal acceptance, just as there is a difference between tolerance of beliefs and universal love and salvation and universal acceptance. There are some different ways to think about this. On an individual level, we have guiding principles and values that provide a map or at least landmarks that help us as we navigate our daily lives and our big choices and challenges. Whether you might refer to this as your own personal ethics or your own personal values, it's the principles that we each have come to believe in or at least move towards. In this sense, universal might have a certain meaning to you, and acceptance may have a certain meaning. And I'm not really sure where I am with regards to if I could fully name universal acceptance as a belief of mine or as a guiding principle. I'm not sure I'm really there yet, or if I ever will be. Inherent worth and dignity can in fact be a lot to aspire to some days, especially when it, for instance, comes to something like the stupidity of other drivers on the road. As anyone who has ever ridden with me can tell you, I have definite opinions about that I vocalize. All of the questions that the idea of universal acceptance, all these questions are good, juicy ones for us to think on ourselves. So I encourage you to do that in the coming days. Not just the individual side. Let's talk about it from the standpoint of our community, because that's a whole different matter than our individual guiding values. What do tolerance and acceptance mean for us as a religious community? What does the universal part of our universalist heritage compel us to be or to do? There are a couple of hallmarks of our modern-day faith tradition that speak to this. One is our theological foundation that we affirm and support the spiritual journeys and beliefs of each and every person here, whether you're here in the room or listening in to us online. We support the searching and the answers that we may each find. That's part of the big tent of who we are. And there's another important hallmark to that too, that of our welcoming. I consider the welcoming to be one of the two main missions of modern-day Unitarian Universalism, alongside our justice work. We are a place of welcoming, of love and compassion that doesn't care what challenges you're facing, but's ready to embrace you and love you for whoever you are. That's the kind of welcoming that the author of the story that Karen shared is talking about. We welcomed women into leadership and into the ministry well before other faith traditions did. We welcomed our LGBT siblings, truly welcomed them well before most other faith traditions. But does this mean that we're always good at welcoming? Does it mean that we're great at welcoming a full diversity of beliefs? No to that as well. We often have trouble welcoming many Christian beliefs, or even some that may slightly sound Christian. We have trouble with any open discussion or statement of conservative political views, despite the fact, as I've said, by the way, I'll say it again, and I'll get complaints after the service too, that I believe across Unitarian Universalism that a full potentially 20 to 25% of Unitarian Universalists are over on the conservative side of the political spectrum. But do we welcome that reality openly? No. We have trouble welcoming folks who look or behave too far outside some unspoken norm. It turns out our welcoming as a community is only aspirational as well. Now, does this mean that we should change who we are as a community to be able to be a place of welcome for a particular sort of thing? Well, yes and no. It's okay that we have our own distinct identity and our own distinct heritage and our own distinct traditions. It's okay for us to be something. It's okay for us to be someone. But it is also worth reflecting on those unspoken norms and what things we may go about doing, whether consciously or unconsciously, that exclude others, that exact those norms and enforce them. It's worth reflecting on where those norms may be coming from, whether it may be from a place of fear, of our knee-jerk reactions to our cultural backgrounds, our religious backgrounds, or some other need for sameness and similarity, or other embedded assumptions. Depending on what we may find, it may be okay, or it might be worth changing. A story, I don't have this written down, and I might have shared it here, but it is worth sharing again. Beautiful couple walked into a Unitarian Universalist congregation I was serving. They were young, perhaps late 20s, African American, dressed in their Sunday best. They were Pentecostal Universalists, followers of the faith of the likes of Carlton Pearson, who believed the traditional historical meaning of our universalism, that belief in universal salvation. And they're saying, we're looking for a universalist place that we can come and worship. I was so thrilled they were there. I wanted my congregation to get to engage with this other side of our theology and our theological heritage. Was I surprised when they stopped attending because of the welcome they didn't find? No, I wasn't. Because our folks just didn't know what to do with them. They were too far outside the norm, and that breaks my heart. The acceptance and welcoming and building of bridges rather than barriers are what we hope our work with partners and coalitions does too. Because it calls us to not turn away when we're shunned, but instead, when we are shunned, to stay put and work on that relationship. In the last place I served, there was a religious coalition in town, pretty conservative Christian. And I was the utter oddball in the room. Finally, they said, it's okay if you come to just the public part of our meeting, but then you have to leave before we do the business part. So I started doing that. I started coming and showing up and being nice and being human and showing up for some of the service work, and I'd leave when I was told to do so. A few months later, they stopped remembering to ask me to leave. A few months later, they asked me to serve on their religious interfaith committee. A few months later, they asked if I'd chair it. At this point, it still happened that when I showed up for one of their monthly meetings and introduced myself to the person sitting next to me, oftentimes they'd get up and move across the room. So when they invited me to be chair, I declined and said, you know, I think it would make more sense for me to be a voting member of the organization before I actually lead one of your committees. It isn't easy. It isn't easy when we don't find the acceptance to model the even tolerance that we hope to find. And we can't touch on acceptance and tolerance without also naming our overall national scene as it's been over the past, what are we at now, almost 8 years? Longer, yes, I know. These trends come back. It seems like polarity and a lack of tolerance are the status quo rather than anything else. It is sad to see the gulf between people grow wider rather than circles get drawn to call people in. We should be drawing those circles that include folks, not drawing solid barriers that keep us only listening to our own views and being with people who think or act like us. Acceptance is a lofty goal, probably an unobtainable one. But how about tolerance and a little of acknowledging that someone else may have ideas that they think are worthwhile and may have worth if we really look deeply? How about compassion? How about kindness and starting there? I worry about the way forward and what it might look like without it. Worry about how far away from one another we can really get and what it might mean for our neighbors and even our families. These are some of the questions we are faced with these days. Do I have words of hope to tell us, yeah, we'll find a way, we'll get there? I wish I did. I see challenges here for each one of us, challenges to ask of ourselves, questions to define our guiding principles, and challenges as we decide and as we make the commitment to stay in the room, even when somebody, after hearing who we are, gets up and moves across the room, but to keep showing up and not to get up and move away from them. Finding ways to not get up, but then gradually, ever so gradually, brick by brick, building bridges and being the bridges to be the changes we hope to see in the world. These are the challenges that we face, and I hope that we're up for them.
Thank you, Reverend Michelle. We invite you now to make an offering. In this way, we each have the opportunity to help our community thrive and remain resilient. We're continuing to conduct the offering without passing a plate. Instead, you can either give electronically by scanning the QR code on the back of your badge, or you can put a cash or check donation into the donation envelope that you'll find in back of the pew in front of you. Write your name on it, mark offering plate or pledge, and then put it in the donation box beside what used to be a fountain in the atrium as you leave the service. I learned that we're not having a fountain right now because of the drought. Each week, half of the offering plate is shared with a local, nonprofit, good neighbor organization recommended by our Social Justice Council. We're grateful, really grateful, that you've continued to practice generosity with the UUCB and our good neighbors throughout these tough times. Your offering of any value is always accepted with gratitude. You remember maybe that the Good Neighbor organization for this month is Richmond High School Marching Band. They're raising money to travel to march in Disneyland. As Andrew Wilkie, the band's director, has said, contributions will support a group of students who pour their hearts and souls into the band with an energy that can be felt when you hear them perform. The trip will give these high school students a chance to travel outside their community and provide them with many learning opportunities. Thank you. And now, please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service.
This has been fabulous being here together with you today. And of course, I have announcements about more exciting stuff going on in our church community. First, I love the picture. Thank you, Paul Hudson, who put together our slides for this week, and to all of the folks that helped make our services that on the technical side happen behind the scenes. And he made pictures for us today, so thank you. I've only gotten a few, so wanted to announce I'm still collecting flash drives and SD cards and micro SD cards for our flash drive, which is collecting drives for Flash Drives for Freedom, a nonprofit that works to get supplies filled with information into the hands of North and South Korean activists who then smuggle that information into North Korea. If you have old flash drives, old SD cards, micro SD cards, you don't even have to worry about cleaning them off. The organization will empty them and put the information on. Please bring them on into the church in the next couple of weeks. And spring chalice circles are beginning soon. If you're new here, you might be wondering, what's a chalice circle? They are our small groups. There are core small groups here, which are groups of folks who get together regularly to connect with one another, to make nice little communities where folks really engage in spiritual growth and personal growth together and really just get to hear one another. There will be information about them in the week ahead and the newsletter. Please reach out to Lenore Ralston for more information. And today after the service is the Candidates Forum with candidates for your Board of Trustees for next year. It'll be in the fireside room where they'll be talking about answers to a number of questions. You can get to know them, get to know some of their thoughts. And then we'll have a congregational meeting, our regular February one, after the service on February 12th. So that's in 2 weeks. We will not be voting on anything about Freestone at that meeting. Instead, we'll be scheduling a congregational meeting likely sometime in March, where we'll be taking up questions about the Freestone Retreat property. So the February meeting is with the normal congregational business for February and election of members to your Board of Trustees and nominating committee. And again, after the service, the candidates forum today in the fireside room. Did you get all that? You're like, yes, please just finish the service so we can go get coffee. Of course. Please rise in body or in spirit. Number 360 in the gray hymnal if you like. Here we have gathered. The words will be on screen.
Gathered side by side, circle of kinship,
find shelter in being seen for who you are. May you find hope in this place and community. May you dwell always in your inherent goodness. And may goodness and hope be your home. Go now with peace, with courage, with kindness, and remember you're never all alone. Blessed be.